Hello! When I started planning this video, originally I was going to have it just be about tattoos and being a Mennonite with them. But then as I was trying to plan it, I realized there's a lot more to it than just talking about that. The reason is I grew up in a subculture. I wasn't raised in a Mennonite family, though it was still a Christian environment. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about the subculture that I was raised in and how tattoos come into that. And then what does it mean for my faith? When I was a child, I grew up with two older brothers. One was a metalhead and one was a bit of a skate punk. We used to go to this one bookstore, and it was a Christian bookstore, and many times we would go into this lower level that had cassette tapes, and my brothers would pick out this death metal and this punk music that like no one really ever really knew. Like some people did, but they weren't on the radio. So they would buy these cassette tapes in like the late 80s, early 90s, and they would listen to this music around me. They even taught me how to do a death grunt when I was 6 years old. We also grew up under the eye and guidance of a strict, loving Christian mother. She believed that we should only be listening to what she called sanctified music. But I think that she did that because in her early 20s, she became a Christian and she started hanging out with all these ex-hippies, these holy rollers. Even though she was never a hippie and never got into that lifestyle, she looked the part. And I think it gave her a certain mindset because so many of these people around her were like former drug addicts, and so they understood the spirituality of the effects of music with drugs. I think it kind of freaked her out for what she saw of people having their spiritual lives kind of diminished because of the effects of the two, that she was a little bit hard on us with what we would listen to. And I don't really blame her for that. She was doing the best she could. My brothers and I understood that there was some spiritual warfare around us, even in our own household. And there was the pull of the world versus the pull of God. I even witnessed my oldest brother, who's almost 10 years older than me, burning some of his music. And that's because some of these bands that were not Christian bands did have an effect on him, while others did not. And I wasn't one to question that because I didn't know what he was going through. I was nowhere near his age, so I didn't get it. Some Christians think you just shouldn't listen to any type of music that's not Christian, and I disagree. But at the same time, we have to be careful what we're consuming because it could have an effect on us. So while I enjoyed some of my brother's variety of music and the stuff that they listened to, I was drawn more to like classic rock, 60s and 70s music. But there were some bands that I felt weird listening to, so I stayed away from them. And it was just, I guess maybe, you know, the spirit leads people in different ways. When I was going through tough times, this music would usually make me feel a lot better. And so I think that's what I mean. It's all about balance. We had a wide variety of music tastes, and I thank my brothers for being able to show me lots of different types of genres. So I didn't really know how to find any bands for myself that were in the underground music scene. I didn't know what to do. However, there was this one guy who was about a year or two older than I was, who went to my youth group, and he decided he was going to put on some punk shows. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I knew what those were, so I helped out. There was even one time, in late 1998, I took the money from the people that were entering the show. And there was even one of the punk bands playing there that was a band with some people in it that went to my old church. So I was like, oh, I know these people. But I still didn't know how to explore it, and I didn't have a computer until 1999, and I didn't have the internet till 2000. And I switched from a Christian school to a public school in 1999, entering my sophomore year. And there were loads of kids that listened to lesser known bands that were part of those underground subcultures. And one of them I was really drawn to. He was wearing suits, and I was fascinated because I was like, wow, that's something you don't really see, people wearing suits. And I was intrigued, and his best friend also wore these suits with him. It was a cute little duo, but it was the short one that got my attention. And I found out just asking around that, you know, he liked punk, ska, and hardcore metal, all sorts of type of music. And then I heard he was a Christian too, and I wanted to meet him. And it took a few months, but I finally met him. And upon meeting him, I found out he was even in a band. I started to talk to him about God, about life, about music, and I was looking forward to even seeing his band perform a few months later. When I was all ready to go, my mom said, okay, you could go. And I was gonna go with this one friend, but her mom wouldn't let her go because she heard stories about the place where these shows were going to take place. And so I didn't get to go see him play, and I was really bummed out. It was then that I heard that there were shows being played just by my house, a few places by my house. And I was like, oh, I started dating the guy. And he's like, yeah, I'll take you to these shows. And right away, that weekend that we started dating, we went to a couple shows. The weekend after, we went to several shows. And it became a thing where just every weekend we would go, sometimes Fridays, Saturdays, and Sunday nights, we would go to these shows. And it would be almost every weekend. So I started to learn more about these bands. And while I didn't really fit in even there, I never really fit into anything. I dressed more like a raver hippie girl than anything, but I really enjoyed the music. And it taught some of the people around me that you don't have to look the part of the music that you like. I liked the clothes I liked, and I liked the music that I got into, but they didn't mix that much for me, and that was okay. Some of these bands were Christians. I didn't know how to find these bands still. And my boyfriend, he would tell me like, hey, let's play this CD. And I would listen, and he would buy me CDs and I would buy CDs. So slowly I started to learn more and I started to enjoy it a lot. And these Christian bands, I thought, what a great way to be able to spread the gospel to a group of kids that maybe never would have heard it another way. So we formed sort of a community, having friends from both sides of the spectrum, so we could try to be there for some and then understand others. So it was an interesting balance to play, and it wasn't always easy. And my husband had been in a few non-Christian bands and like one Christian band, but that was much later. But it's known that in these subcultures, there are a lot of band members that have tattoos, and then all the people that go to these shows seeing their band members with tattoos that they really enjoy their music, they also started to get tattoos. When I was a teen, I was like, I'm never getting a tattoo. I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Well, my boyfriend became my husband, and he had these plans for tattoos on his wrists for a long time, and he finally got them on our first wedding anniversary. This is just to cut this up a bit. I just want to show something interesting. There's Rob and I on the right with our two oldest kids. Went to RevGen 2010, and it was the first time bringing our kids with us to a show. We saw OC Supertones, which we had seen a few times, and this happened. Rob began dancing what is called skanking to ska music.
Okay, let's teach you a song with that. Dancing, you guys, especially you, Dusty, soon. See, now, I want you guys to observe, the guys especially. The girl with you, relationship with wife? Okay, guys, fellas, have you noticed that Dusty Suit's wife is much prettier than he is handsome? That's because he's a good dancer. I'm not knocking you, dude, I'm ugly too. But look, you can, guys, the ladies like a guy who can dance, am I right?
So when reading the Bible, especially going into Leviticus 19, verse 28, which says to not make cuts on your body and make marks for the dead, I found in my research that a lot of the times in that culture, people were worshiping other gods, and they were literally cutting themselves and harming themselves for their gods. And then they were also doing a sign of mourning for the people that died by doing that. And it was all part of blood. You know, their sinfulness had to be covered with blood in that time. And so God was saying, hey, don't do that because I am the Lord your God. And that's what he ends that verse with. But also people were taking ashes from their family members and people they really loved, and they were putting them in their skin. So they were always with them, and it made marks on their skin through putting these ashes inside them. So that was marking themselves for the dead. Had nothing to do with our tattoos today. So it's important, I believe, to learn the culture of a lot of these verses, because it's like, for instance, in New Jersey, we have in one of the towns a law that you're not allowed to eat pickles on Sunday, and you're not allowed to dispose of them on the road. You could get arrested for it. What was going on in the culture then that now it's like, what? That's ridiculous. And then also there's even a New Jersey law where we're supposed to have people running with us next to the car, warning about that a car is coming because it could scare the horses when people are still in their horse and buggy. That's still a law, but we're not doing that. Do you see anyone doing that? Some of these laws that were put into play had to deal with the culture of the time and what was going on. Then I realized how King Solomon, when he was building a temple for the Lord, he was adorning it with so many things, so many features that God told him to put in it. When Jesus came around and he died and sacrificed his life to save us from sin. He tore the curtain in the temple so that it was a sign that no longer does God dwell in this temple. Now God is accessible for people everywhere. We could accept him and have him dwell within us. And so our body is now a temple. So I see a lot of Christians with tattoos, and they tell a story and they tell a message, and we are supposed to be witnesses of God. And you think if Christians might have art in their home that have to do with God, they might have bumper stickers on their car. This is, a way to witness to people that maybe need to hear the gospel, where you have, maybe you have tattoos. I have tattoos. So I got them before I became a Mennonite. I believe it's such a great way to testify, to tell your story. People ask me all the time, like, oh, what's your tattoo mean? That opens up a chance for me to explain it. And if they go like, oh, that's fine, at least I said it, they might look at me weird and maybe they'll think about it and it's fine. So I said, my husband, he has scriptures on his wrists that are tattoos that give a message. People ask him all the time, what does that mean? What is that verse? On top of this, in Revelation 19:16, Jesus is described as coming back riding on a white horse with on his robe and on his thigh, the writing on his thigh and on the robe say, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So for me, I'm like, how is that written? Is it a tattoo? Then I think about our culture today and what it might be like in the future even, and how tattoos are like becoming more normalized, where people aren't really looking at you funny and going like, how dare you? And so, for all you know, Jesus, he might be a punk rocker guy coming back to get everyone. And so it could be a tattoo. And on the same point, my own mother believes that too. While I'm not covered with tattoos, nor do I want to be, I know so many Christians and people that are not Christians that are covered with tattoos. And that's their decision. It's easy for some people to point out things that they think might be sinful, while inside we might be having such horrible, sinful desires, and we might be living our lives in deep sin. But we're so focused on these outward appearances of other people instead of trying to fix the problems within us. And now there are some people out there that are Christians or become Christians, and they have these tattoos that maybe meant something to them at one point, but now it's like the message is just horrible. And they're like, I can't believe I have this on my body. Some people might get new tattoos to cover them up. Some tattoos you can't really cover. With that, they can use it as like, hey, this, if someone says like, why do you have this tattoo? You'd be like, well, I was a drug addict, I was an alcoholic, or whatever their story might be. And they could explain like, I got this at a low point in my life, but now I have been rescued from my sinfulness and God has helped me. So I got this tattoo instead. And they could point to another one to be like, to redeem this problem. So I think it is such a beautiful thing when you think about how tattoos can convey a way and an opportunity to spread the gospel message. I am so very grateful for the subculture that I was raised around and grew up in. So even though I have tattoos, and maybe eventually I'll get even more, I'm not sure. But if I do, between me and God, and we'll see what happens with that, I'm not going to remove my tattoos. And just because I'm a Mennonite, I'm not going to say like, yeah, I must not be of God because I have tattoos. Like, you can't do that to people. And some people, they don't have tattoos, and that is great. I think that's beautiful. Anything that is sinful within me, I am working on with God. The music that I listen to, there are so many bands that I really love, and there are some that like, I don't listen to music that has messages that I think are just awful, that have bad language. I don't listen to that. There are a lot of non-Christian bands that have amazing music without having bad language and without having really disgusting messages. And you'd be surprised about how beautiful their messages might be. Even if they're not Christian, I feel like God's Spirit can really talk to people as they write music, and they may not even recognize it as being God, just like we are told in the Bible that sometimes non-believers can be used of God to speak to us. This is why I listen to all sorts of music, and I'm not going to just push away every single thing that's not Christian. But I think it's okay and totally great if some people are convicted where they say, I cannot listen to anything but Christian music because I feel this way. And it's like, that is God speaking to them in that way. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit, because I have had so many messages through other videos and even privately, like, why do you have tattoos? How are you a tattooed Mennonite? Like, I don't get it. Some people just are very judgmental and rude without even knowing me at all, and they just go like, ew, I hate this. Like, oh, how dare you? There are so many people out there that just, I decided It's time to do this video. I've been planning this for like a year and I finally have it out. So I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, bye.